today, and then we move on to other things. So it's going to be a much more practical class. As we continue, we were getting back, doing a recap so that we can proceed to the advanced concepts for today. We had emphasized on the meaning of HTML. We had said that is the standard language for creating web pages, and that it defines the structures for a web page. It works hand in hand with CSS and JavaScript. We already done that. So I was explaining about, for instance, the Safaricom.co.ke page, whereby if we about inspect element and view page source, that's what I was explaining about. And I'd say that for you to see the source code of any page on the internet, you can right click on it on your mouse, and then you can see a drop down list with something about inspect or view page source. So when you click on either of it, it takes you to a new page. So for instance, this one takes us to this page where we are able to see the source code for the Safaricom web page. So for instance, you can see it's basic HTML. That's why it's essential for us to grasp this, because regardless of which field, front end, back end, full stack you want to work with, we cannot avoid HTML. It's part of the basics. So I was also explaining about some advanced concepts such as SEO, search engine optimization. This is also part of HTML that is a bit advanced, whereby you add some meta tags or some tags to your HTML code, and when somebody searches through Google by use of these keywords or these tags that you're adding to your HTML code, they will be able to be ranked higher on the Google search engine, so that whenever someone searches their name or something that relates to them, it's their page that will be appearing faster. So for instance, if we inspect the page source for the Safaricom page, you can see there's a line, there's a few lines here. So for instance, this one, name equals the description. So this description that Google is given, and the content is that discover Safaricom mobile data and the better services in Kenya. So if you touch any of these, it's supposed to rank the Safaricom page on top. Like, that's what you're going to be seeing first, especially on Google for those who use, but most people use Google browsers. So on Google, this is what is going to be ranking first because of those tags that they're using for SEO. I had digressed because we were doing a recap. So as we had said that HTML or hypertext markup language is also the standard language for creating web pages, and it defines the structure of a web page using things that are called elements. So when working with HTML, you will be using things that are called elements and tags a lot. So it is essential to understand the difference. So as we're looking, this is just a recap, we're looking at the course of HTML. So there are things in HTML that are called elements and tags. Since HTML defines the structure of web pages and we use it to create elements, so the elements that we are creating are elements of the paragraph, heading, list, images, and many more. And we need to differentiate between what an element is and what a tag is. So the elements are the content that is wrapped to the tags. Let me open an HTML file. Okay, so let me create a new file. Okay, so the difference between elements and tags is that elements surround are surrounded by the tag is what the content is wrapped in. So usually when we are writing HTML code, you will see something similar to this, right? And then these are some content. These are some content. So you will usually see something like this. So this that begins and also ends, it's supposed to be a small p. This that begins and also ends is what we call the tags. And tags, there are usually two of them, what we call the opening tag and the closing tag. So the opening tag is usually just the angled bracket or the less than and the greater than signs. And then the closing tags is the angled brackets and also slash like that. That is the difference between the opening and the closing tags. So these opening tags, what they do is that they tell the browser that this is the start of an HTML element. So when you look at the content of a page, for instance, we had seen this is the source code for this page. For you, you just see the element part. You won't see the tags, but the what is rendering the page needs to understand that this is where this element begins and this is where this element ends, and that this is another element, and so forth and so forth. So that is why we have these tags. For instance, the opening tags tells the browser that this is the start of an HTML element, and sometimes it comprises of keywords and so forth. And the closing tags, these ones here, are what tells the browser, because the browser is what will read this HTML content. Even if we go live, it will go to our browser because that is how it is recognized. So the closing tags will tell the browser where the elements end. So for instance, it will tell the browser this is a paragraph at the beginning, the opening tag, and the ending tag will tell the browser this is where this paragraph ends. So it has a slash before in the middle of the opening, the angled brackets. It has a forward slash. So we've seen what the opening tag is and the closing tag is, and then we have some content. And what elements are the container for the contents. We're going to see all of that. Another thing that you need to be aware of is that HTML has a very big list of these predefined tags, and they are about 140, I think so, 140, but you won't ever use them all. That's the beauty of it. So if we go to a page called, you can go to your browser and search a page called devdocs.io, devdocs.io. You can go to your browser and search for a page called devdocs.io, and when you search for this page, you will see some of these. But what we are interested at the far left here, you will see some of this, something similar to this. What we're interested in at the moment is HTML. So when you click on it, you can see HTML has 138 attributes and 140 elements, and other things miscellaneous 4019. But what we're interested in is these elements. So it says that HTML has 140 elements. So these are the different types of elements that HTML has, but you will never use all of them at any given point. You will use some of them, so they should not scare you. You will never use all of them at a go, or probably some of them you'll never use in your life. So these are the elements that HTML has. It has 140 of them. So it is important to know the basics or the most important ones that you'll be using, and know the correct tags for displaying such content. For example, to display a paragraph, you'll be using the p element. Here it is, the p element. To display a paragraph, you'll be using the p element. To display something else, let's say the nav bar, you'll be using the nav element. For ordered list, you'll be using OL. For ordered lists, for list, you'll be using LI. For another list you'll be using UL and so forth and so forth. So it is important to know and use the correct tags because they have a big impact on your site or your whatever page you're building in. They help in how it is ranked in the search engines and also how accessible it is to the users. Maybe for the users who use, for example, the blind or yeah, people with visual issues. So sometimes they use assistive technologies like a screen reader and so forth and so forth. So it is important for you to use this correctly. Let me show an example. Mm, let's find where there's an image. I want to show you an example. Here it is. You can see for in this paragraph here, they had an image for a mobile logo. And this part here where they put the alt and then they wrote Safaricom Mobile. Uh, if the internet is slow or this user is not able to see this image, what will appear is this title, the Safaricom Mobile, and this person or this user will be able to understand that whatever is supposed to be here is a mobile phone, maybe from Safaricom and so forth and so forth. So it is important to understand these tags and elements because you're going to be using them a lot. And also using the correct elements for content is sometimes called semantic HTML. We'll go much into depth later on that. I have said that most elements will have an opening tag and a closing tag, but there are some elements which are called void elements. Void elements. So these ones, they only have one tag. They don't have actually an opening or a closing. They only have one tag. For instance, let's say horizontal rule. We also have something like a line break or something like an, what else? Something like an image. So these are some examples of what we call void elements. So these are elements that do not have a closing tag. They are called void elements. So these are just elements because they are void of any content. There is nothing inside of them. So because they don't have a closing tag, it means no content can be wrapped around them. Or sometimes they're also called self-closing tags. Self-closing tags. You may see them also being written like this for horizontal rule, something like that. For break, you may see it being written like this. And for image, you may also be seeing it written something like this. These ones have no like specific way of writing them. As long as they don't have an opening and closing tag, they can be written anyhow. The browsers will be able to run it fine. But now we are on in HTML5 here. HTML5 sometimes has an issue with that. That's HTML5 sometimes has an issue with that, but most of them will render them correctly. So these are what we call the void elements or elements with self-closing tags. I'm just doing a recap before we finalize because this is the last installment for these lessons on HTML. And Benjamin had done most of the work, so I'm just finalizing as we continue. We had also talked about what we call the HTML boilerplate. This is the HTML boilerplate, and like I say, like we have been told, we use the exclamation mark and then click enter, and it brings the Emmet abbreviation. Some of you were facing challenges with this, but one of the solutions that we found is that we also had some of you had Django template installed in your VS Code. So you see here when we're down here, it is written for you. Yes, someone is speaking. Yes, Nicholas. Okay. So if you see down here for you on your end is not written HTML, it's written Django HTML or something like that. maybe sometimes the Emmet abbreviation may not work. So you can click here and then type HTML and then click enter and it will read. And now I think Emmet abbreviation will be working on your end. So it's just the exclamation and then enter. So this is the basic structure, what we call a boilerplate. And it always needs to be in place before you can do anything useful with the HTML code. So you need to know the different parts of the HTML boilerplates, and you need to be able to write it often, because sometimes you may be asked to not use the Emmet abbreviation, to just write this. It's not a lot of lines, and some of them, like this part, this line 4, line 5, is not that important. So you may just need to write around 6 lines, 7 there, 6, 7 lines there. So it's okay. So that is what the HTML boilerplate is. It's important that you know it because you'll be using it a lot, sometimes as a placeholder before you write whatever code you want to write. The other thing that it is important to know whenever you're learning a new language, you need to know how to comment your code in that language. So, for example, there's a way that HTML code is commented. There's a way that the Python code is commented. Remember that for Python code, we used the pound. Okay, let me create a Python file. Best.py. Okay, so for Python, we say that if you want, let's say this is something random, and I want to comment on this line. I just come here before it, and I type the pound, and you can see it's commented out. So that is how we comment out code in Python. For HTML, the way we comment it out is a bit different. So for instance, I want to comment out this line 6. This line 6 is what I want to comment out in HTML. I will type the angle bracket like that. Then I type dash dash like that. Then angle bracket, exclamation, then dash dash. That is how it is. Angle bracket, exclamation, dash dash. Then I go at the end because you can see right now it has commented everything, but I wanted to comment only line 6 at the end. Now I put the opposite of this. So I start with a dash dash, exclamation, and then the angle bracket like that. Oh, yeah, like that. So I'll repeat this part with something. Let's write a paragraph here. Okay, this is a paragraph, and I want to comment this paragraph here. So I'll just type the angle bracket, exclamation, dash dash, and then at the end here, you see now it has completed it for me. This is how it's supposed to be. My content is supposed to be here in the middle. So like this. So whatever is in here is supposed to be here in the middle. So it's like this, the angle bracket, exclamation, dash, 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 then my content up to here, and then the other part. That is how it's supposed to be. Like this. So this is how it's supposed to be when you're commenting out a code. It's supposed to be like this. So it's also important to know how to comment your code in HTML. Another thing that we were supposed to recap on is working with texts in HTML. So for instance, we are creating a page in HTML, and in HTML, most content in the web is text-based. So apart from all these elements and tag things, the rest is usually text-based. It's what you are writing, the text. That is what you will be seeing on the page here. You see the text. These other things are just the elements and the tags, but you can see most of what a page is usually the text and sometimes images, links, and so forth. But it's what now we're going to be seeing working with the text. I think we also covered some part of this in terms of how to create a paragraph, how to create a heading. We're also going to see how to make a text bold, how to to make a text in italics, and then we're going to see the relationship between method elements and how to create search. So, for instance, this page, we just want to say that what will we say we are working on? Let's say we are working on recipes. Recipes. So our page is going to be about recipes. So we want to create our home page. So in the basic structure of our HTML, the boilerplate, let's clear so that we can see it. In the boilerplate, it comes like this. This is how it comes by default. So you see this thing which is written document. Yes, you see it. If you can see it, let me show you where it usually appears so that you see why it is important to change it. So this thing that is written in documents is usually this part of your HTML, this part here, which is showing what this page is about. So whenever you have multiple pages that you're working on, to keep track, it's better to write what page you are on here, up here on this part, so that it's visible. So for example, if you're working on your home page, you will just say that this is here. You can just say home. This is how you can remember. You can just say home, so that whenever you run it up here, it will write for you home, and you'll be able to remember that this is the home page. If it's a page about the about page, you will write it about page, it will appear up there, and you'll be able to know that this is the about page. So that is what this title is, the title of the page. So usually you go to where the body is. Where the body is where you start working on from your code. So as we said, we had the opening tags and the closing tags. So between the opening and the closing tags is where you start working on your code. So here in the middle, I said that we have 140 elements, but we're not going to be using all of them. So I'll just touch on the most common that we're going to be using. So the first one that we're going to be seeing is P for paragraph. And most HTML in VS Code has autocomplete. So when you start the opening tag, it writes the closing tag for you. So this is where you write most of your code. So for example, here we'll just use Lorem Ipsum. So this is just an element abbreviation. This Benjamin already covered this. As I said, this is a recap, so don't worry. Just want it to be visible. Yeah, so this is Lorem Ipsum. So this is just boilerplate. It's also another boilerplate. When you want to, let's say you're working for a company and you are making for them the page, and they're not yet giving you the content that you're supposed to write here. You know, they are the ones who are specific about what is to be written here. For example, this is written 2025, and maybe you're working on this page in 2020 or 2021, you could not have updated 2025. You see, so sometimes you just put the placeholder boiler code here before you put the real content that you want there. So that is where Lorem Ipsum comes. There are many types of Lorem Ipsums. If you just search Lorem Ipsum on Google, you'll find the different types and sometimes a bit of history about them, so you know which one you need. There's one called Bro, and all of them you can see it's dummy text. So you can search and you will decide whatever to do with it. It has a lot of iterations on it. So for example, we have done the paragraph boilerplate, because for instance, let's go and look at it in the browser. This is how it appears in the browser. Let's write this paragraph without using the P element. We see how it will look. So I've removed the P element, and also I've removed it on the other side. So let's go back to the browser and let's refresh. So the content will still show, but it won't show that this is a paragraph. It will just show that this is how the content appears on your machine. But now to make it clearer, so let's say if we have some other content here, for example, we wanted to put another paragraph here. Let's say we wanted that Lorem Ipsum here, another paragraph here. When we go back to our browser, let's refresh. You see, it just shows that it is one big thing instead of two different paragraphs. So let's put these paragraph things here. We see the difference. This is just what I do. Let's put the closing paragraph tag here. Okay. That is the closing paragraph tag there. And then we put the opening here. Okay, so there, then up here we put the other one for this, the previous part. Then the opening one up here. It has already appeared also. So now, if you can see there's a clear differentiation of whatever you are writing. That is also the importance of whatever you are doing. You can see there's a clear differentiation that it's the first paragraph and this is the second paragraph. That is what the essence of whatever you are doing, so that you can see it differently. Because now when you're working with a web browser, when the browser it encounters the new lines in HTML, it needs to if there are not those, let's say like the way we did without the paragraph tags. So when the browser encountered that, it does compress them into one single space, and you saw that the text it was clamped up together into one long thing, and that's not how it's supposed to be. So we use the paragraph element, which adds a new line after each paragraph. In primary school, we did paragraphs and so forth. So we use that to add new paragraphs and so forth. The other thing was headings. Headings with HTML, we have H1 to H6. So headings, they are different from these other HTML text elements because they are usually displayed larger and bolder. Yeah, larger and bolder than the other text to signify that these are headings. There are people who use red biro, black biro, then blue biro. So those people who do that, so these headings are like those people. So when you're writing a heading in red, then you underline it in black, and then you write whatever you're writing in blue pen. So it's the same scenario here with heading. So it will be different. It will be larger than the other content. It will also be bolder. It's someone was asking a question. It's HTML. We are doing a recap. So it's still HTML. We are doing a recap as we continue adding a few things that were left out because this is the last class. So as I was saying about people writing in red and blue pen, so the same. So headings, it's like that, and there are only 6 of them. And it's ideal if you write them in order. Like if you start with H1, then you go to H2, then you go to H3 up to H6. You can yes, you can do, let's say, H1, H3, but it's not ideal. So the best practice is to write them in order. So for instance, right here, we just write H. It's usually the H, that's letter H, and then number 1. That is like the first tag. We can have H1. We type this is heading 1. Okay, let me remove this paragraph, or let me comment it out first. We'll get back to it. Okay, so this is heading 1. We want to repeat H1 to H6, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. Heading 2. So you can type it manually. H3. This is heading 3. H4. H6. H5. Then 4, 5, and then 6. So what essentially I've done, I've typed this is heading 1, this is heading 2, using the heading tags so that we can see the difference. So I've typed this heading 1, H1 using H1 tag. This is heading 2 using the H2 tag. This is heading 3 and so forth up to H6 so that we can see the difference on our browser. So you can see this is how it appears on our browser. I hope you can all see that. You can see that H1 is bigger, then it is followed by H2 up to H6 that is much smaller. So depending on whatever you're working on, using the correct level of heading is important, as these levels, like let's say H1, they provide hierarchy, like order. Unajua, this is the big part, the big heading, this is the subheading, so it provides hierarchy to your content. So the H1 should always be used for headings for the overall page. Like this is the big heading for whatever you're working on, and then the other H1 tags will be used for the sub contents and so forth and so forth, or subheadings and so forth and so forth. So for the content for the smaller section, you can use that. We are also going to be looking at something we call it the strong element. So this element is what makes our text bold. Like you can see, this is a bold. This is bold. So I'll go back here. Let me also let me comment out this part. Okay, so we want to write a line, just a sentence. So we'll use the paragraph tag, and we want to write read more or click here, click for further further instructions, something like that. Further instructions. Yeah, instructions. Click for further instructions. So we want this page, it writes click for further instructions, but now we want this thing called instructions to appear more bolder than the other, or we want click for further, or we want the whole sentence. Let's just say we want instructions. We want instructions to appear more bolder. So click here for further instructions on the topic, something like that, on the topic, because I want the center part on the topic. So this is how it looks. Click here for further instruction on the topic, and we want further instructions to be bolder. So we're going to be using an element called a tag called strong tag. So if I come here to further instructions, I create an angle bracket, then I type the name strong like that, and then the closing tag for strong, I push it to after the name instructions. So click here for then the strong tag further instructions. If I go to the page, I hope you can see the difference that this text, the name further instructions, is bolder as compared to the other one. So this is the strong element that we are going to be using whenever you want to highlight important facts or important text that affects some tools like the screen reader. For, let's say, the example you were saying for people with visual impairment, or people who use this feature that comes with maybe Edge. Let's say this one for read aloud, this read aloud selection. So it will affect the tone of the voice for some of these screen readers and so forth and so forth. That is why we use such elements to ensure that happens. So for instance, if you want to make it bolder, we use that strong element. There are also something called M elements. So EM, it's called EM. EM makes your text in italic. So essentially, what it does is that it places an emphasis on your text, which may also affect some screen readers or those read aloud features. So that is why it is important to know them. So for example, we want to use that M on the name click here. So it's the same way we are doing with strong. I type M and then the closing tag for M appears. I just cut it and put it here for at the end of click here. So we have the M like that, the EM. So I just opened it and then you close it here. And when we go back to our browser, you can see click here is in italics, as in imelala na mbele kidogo is in italics. And then the strong element that we use is bold. You can see the difference between this part, and also this part. You can see there is a difference. So those are the elements that we use when we're doing that. Okay, up to there, I hope we are all okay, that we've been able to understand the basic structure, some of the common elements that we use, H1, paragraph, strong, M. I also want to mention two other ones. I talked about void elements. I don't know if you can remember. I cleared that part. We talked about what we call void elements. These are elements that don't have the opening. Oh, let me also give you another reference. I've told you can use devdocs.io and then you go to the HTML section. That was the first reference that you can be using. The second one and most common reference is called MDN docs. So you just search MDN docs on your browser and it will take you to bring up this. So you go to the first link, this one, Mozilla developer, this one, this is the MDN docs. This is how it will appear. Resources for MDN web docs by Mozilla developer. So this is the MDN web docs. Let me open it. I have it here. MDN. It has like a black icon like this, the MDN web docs. So this will also help you with working with some of these elements. As I've said, we have 140 of them, but you will never use all of them. But with such tools, it can help you understand some of them more, and also other languages as we continue. It can help you understand other languages as we continue. So when you go to it, you go up here to references, and then we go to HTML. So it will give us everything that we need to know. You can see these are some of the most common elements that we are going to be using, as that is what they have highlighted here. Actually, these are some of the most common that we are going to be using. And you see there are many others. There are many. So depending on whatever instance you're working on, you're going to be using such. It will also have tutorials and many more things. For instance, on these elements, it also explains in much more detail. This is for someone who wants to learn more about elements, or here it is HTML elements. So for instance, right now we want to look at void elements. These are the elements that don't have the opening closing tag thingy. So it's just one tag. So for example, the break. If we click on that, it tells what BR stands for. So this is the line break element. It tells that this element produces a line break in a text. That is what it does. And it is useful for writing things that you want a break in, addresses or something like that. We'll look at the example shortly. It tells you more about it and so forth and so forth. And when you go down here in the technical summary, the technical summary actually is what you can be reading. It's faster. It tells you more about it in the shortest period. So you can see just only has a start tag, must not have an end tag. So you can say it like this, BR, or just the way it was, BR without this backslash. Like that. So this is another reference you can be using. It's called MDN docs. Okay, let's go back to our void elements. You're working on what we call void elements. So let's go to void elements. So these void elements, as I've said, they are the elements as I had mentioned, that only have one tag. The opening tags sometimes only they don't have the other tags. So there are many of them. You will, as you go to the references and research more of them, you will get to look into them in more detail. the one that I'm going to cover are the essential ones that I think are important. So, for example, let's uncomment this paragraph, or this first one actually. Mm, let's uncomment it. Mhm. Oh, okay, we want to uncomment this. Okay, and then okay, let's just uncomment the whole of it. There is no issue. Okay, so let's this is how it appears. I've uncommented it, and you can see it appears as two paragraphs like this. If I want this space to be bigger, I can use the break line. So I can come here and put one of these void elements, the break tag like that, BR, and you'll see the space has become bigger compared to what it was before. Let me undo, then we see the difference. Have an undo, and now you can see the space is back to the smaller one. So that is one example of the tags that we can be using. You can see, and even if I write it like this, there is no effect. So you can write it either like that or just like this. That is one of them. The break tag, if you want to break. So for example, if I want the way you write official letters. So if I want to say um, address, uh, then I go, I do not want it to go like that. Yeah, we want a paragraph, we say address, uh, then we say maybe we want the PO box or something like that. Then we say we want it's city or country, something like that. City, maybe then country. Let's just say it. City, comma country. Yeah. When we run this is what how it appears. But if you want the best way for it to appear is if because you've used several paragraphs, that's why it's appearing like this. Okay, but we wanted to use one paragraph. Address P or box city from the box city from country stop then it something like that. Now it's appearing in one line like this, but we want it to appear the way it was appearing before, but now in this order. So I can use the break that we were using before. So I can say it should break here like that, and it moves everything else the next line without the spaces that we were seeing before. I also want it to appear the same for city, country, and date. So I'll place it here and also here. The break, that element, and you can see this is what it does to our page. It makes it like this without the big spaces that we were having before when we were using the paragraph. So for instance, this is what it was looking like when we were using the paragraphs. When we're using the paragraph element, this is how it was looking. Yes, it was spaced like that, but with big spaces. But now we wanted to eliminate the spaces. So we use the break elements. Yes, it will go to the next line, but in the way that we want it to go, like we've done now. So that is one of them. The other one is what we call a horizontal rule. So if you want to have a line, let's also have a look at it using the MDN box. You can just go through them here on the side, the elements. So I want HR horizontal rule. Here it is HR, the horizontal rule. So is it for you if you want a break, but you want it to have a line between the two paragraph, if you, the two like this, a line similar to this between the two different types of text content that you have. Let's say we want between these two paragraphs, we can use the HR, which stands for horizontal rule, HR, and then it does that for us automatically. Now you see we have a line that appears between our content. So that is what we call the horizontal rule. These are the most common ones: the break, line break, the horizontal rule, and others. There are many of them, but these are the most common ones that you need to be aware of. So far we've done the common elements, headings, paragraphs. We've seen void elements like line break or horizontal rule, the most common ones. There are also two other things that we need to be aware of when working with this HTML. I already told you about the HTML comments. We also know how to do that. So we want to have a look at these two things before we move to the a bit advanced contents for today. So these two other things that I wanted to recap on are working with links and working with images. Working with links and working with images. Can clear all of this and just have something new there. So we want to work with links or hyperlinks. So the versatility of HTML allows us to use things like links in our pages, in whatever we are working on. And it's important to know how to input these links. So, for example, for hyperlinks, the element that we use is the href element. The A, then we go to the href element. We will see all of that in detail. Let's have a look at what the A tag does. Let's go to letter A. Yeah, here it is. This is what we use when we want to work with links and so forth. So this is what the letter A, the A or anchor element is what we use. So we use this to create links or hyperlinks to the web or different web pages. So for example, we want to attach a different website to whatever we are working on, or a different file. Maybe it's in our drive or an email address, the location of somewhere, something like that. We use these anchor elements. And some of these elements have things that we call attributes. We're going to see that when we move to the advanced part. So one of the attributes that we're going to be using with our anchor, our anchor element is this attribute called href. We're going to look at the other attributes. There are 40 of them, if I can remember. 138, whatever is 40 was these other things, but attributes, there are 138 of them, almost as many as the elements. We are going to see that. So for now, let's finish with this anchor element. So we're going to use this attribute called href. That is what we're going to be seeing. We had gone to a small explanation of what href does, or the other different attributes that we are going to be using with this. So href, we will see it. We'll see it. I want to get into attributes before we reach that part. So essentially, this is how we write the anchor element. So just say A. That's A. Then we just continue like that. An opening tag and then closing tag for letter A. But now here between, so let's have some space that we are clear on with this like that. So this is how the anchor element is. And by the way, whenever you hover on your HTML elements, it will bring up the MDN reference, the one that I've shown you as a reference point. It will bring up the MDN reference. And if you want to learn more about whatever you are typing there, for example, this anchor element, if you click here on the MDN reference, it's going to take you to the MDN reference that tells you more about whatever you're working on. So this anchor element, this first part, the opening tag. This is where we add our attributes. This is where we add our attributes for whatever we are working on with HTML. This is where we add our attributes. So for instance, in this case, we want to add the href attribute here as we continue working on our page. Here is where we're going to be adding our href attribute. So you go to the opening tag, you space, then type href or whatever attribute you're working on. And after that, you type an equal sign. And since we have the HTML is made easily integrated with VS Code, you can see after I've typed the equal sign, it has given me the quotation marks that I need. So instead of me typing my quotation marks again, it gives me the quotation marks automatically. So in this space with the quotation marks, this is where I input the link that I want this page to take me to. And here, between this closing tag, this angle bracket of the opening tag and the closing tag, this is where I put whatever I want to appear there. So for example, if I put, let's say contact, we want this page to take us to the contacts page. If we go to it, we don't have a link yet, but yeah, you can see it has underlined the name contacts because essentially we're supposed to have a link for contacts. So maybe let's copy this one for Safaricom. I'm not advocating for them, but we can use this just as an example. Yeah, if I put it here, the link to that page, and then I will put contacts. So if we go to our page, you'll just see the name contacts appearing here. And whenever you have these hyperlinks, when you hover on them, usually look at the bottom left of your screen. It tells you whatever that link does, or whatever you want to click on does. As you can see, when I hover on it, in the bottom left of my, now I have to take my mouse, it will not show, but I hope you can see it on your end. At the bottom left of your corner, it tells you whatever link is on that. So if I click on contacts right now, it will take me to that page. Let it load for a few seconds. It has taken me to this page with the following URL. The URL that I had put there, that's the page that it has taken me. It's still loading. And you can see it has taken me to that page. It has taken me to that page, but that's not where I was. So you see, the beauty of attributes is that you can use them to do things the way you want, to expound more on whatever you are doing. Like right now, you've seen that I've clicked on our contacts hyperlink or our contacts page, and it has taken me to this page that it has taken me to, but I did not want it to take me out of the page that I was. I wanted to remain in the page that I was, and for it to open up the link to the page on a different place. But now the beauty of attributes is that they provide these additional things, these additional quirks that you can work with, additional information. And one thing to note about them is that they will mostly or always be on the opening tag. That is where you'll be adding these attributes. So for instance, now I want, whenever I click on that link, for that link to open up in a new page. I don't want it to take me like out of this page. Like when you click on a link, it opens up a new tab. Instead of the way I've done it, when I click on this, it just loads the other page here. But now I want it, when I click on it, for it to load the other page on a new tab, which will be much cleaner. Without, maybe I don't know, maybe I don't remember the URL to this page. I don't want to forget it. So I can still go back to my opening tag, and after where I place the link, this quotation mark, I can add another element, another attribute called target. And then when we just click on target, it also gives me additional quotation marks. And here I will type underscore, then the name blank. Whatever, this essentially tells the browser that blank with a K, not C. This essentially tells the browser that open up this link in a new browser. You see, the blank loads the URL into a new browsing context. You see, so it opens it up in a new tab instead of the tab that I'm on. So if we refresh our page and I now click on contacts again, you can see another tab has opened. I still have my initial tab, but now I have this other one that has opened. So these tabs gives these attributes give us these additional functions that we may need whenever we are working on our code. So they give us this additional function. Uh, by use of the reference, we'll go into in depth with them. There are many of them. If you go with this, for example, this MDN docs, and you or this devdocs.io, and you go maybe into attributes, you'll see the different kinds of attributes, and you'll get to learn more about them. As we said, for the attributes, there are 138 of them, but you will never use all of them. You can go learn about global attributes. These are attributes that can be used on any elements, such as ID, unique identifier, classes for grouping elements, style. For inline styling, if you want to write CSS inline, you can use style as an attribute. When we start on CSS, we look into that. We have title, language, like for this one, for the HTML, this one, this is an attribute called language, lang. So for search, which will be able to tell the browser the specific language that you're using. As you can see here, we have chasset, we have name. So they are what we call, some of them what we call global, others we call specific attributes. These are attributes for specific elements. Like for instance, for this anchor tag, see, we would say that this is called an anchor tag. There are specific attributes that can go with an anchor tag and only an anchor tag. For example, href only goes with an anchor tag. Also, this target also goes only with an anchor tag, and also title goes with an anchor tag. Also the ones for image, we will look at them shortly, and for forms, for inputs, we'll also look at that when we are covering the advanced part, the forms and so forth in shortly, and iframe and so forth. Those are the different attributes. We have global and element specific. Yeah, element specific attributes. That's how they are called, element specific attributes. Another unique element with the attribute that I want us to cover before now we move to the advanced part is one of them for images. We had seen how to set up these images on our previous class, so we are just going to do the same here. So we are going to use the image tag. We are going to be using the image tag. Okay, so here I want us to have an image tag. So whenever the image tag is also a void element, if you can remember, when we were talking about void elements, we said that the image tag is also a void element. So I hope you are able to remember that. And I've been the one talking for so long. I hope I have not left anyone behind. And if you feel that I've left you behind, you can unmute and we can see how we can help one another. Okay. Okay, I said the one for image is also avoid elements as you are starting. So I'm most of them Benjamin already covered. So it's just a wrap up as we conclude our HTML section. So when we type img, you see it does not bring the closing tag automatically like it was doing for the rest, because this is a void element, which means it only has one tag. Opening does not have a closing one. And as we said, the attributes, they typically go to the opening tag. So for instance, this image, since it doesn't have a closing tag, this is where the attributes for image will go. So for example, for here, we will use SRC, which means source, and automatically it gives us quotation marks. So this is where we put the location of our image and the name of our file that contains the image. So for example, if it's in a folder called images, we type the name of that folder, then we put a /. The first part will indicate where it is. If it's in a folder, whatever file you're working on, and you want to put a link to it, so you have to put wherever it is located. So for instance, if we say our image is located in the folder called images, and then now we put the name of our image. So for example, we say we want to put sit.png or JPEG or whatever the image type is. So that is when we put now the other, after the first slash, which shows the browser that this image is located in a folder called images, and this is the name of that photo or that file. That is how we do it. And then we said that some of these attributes that we're going to be using, we are going to be specifically for people maybe with some maybe visual difficulties, or sometimes when the internet is poor, or for these online or browser readers. Like we said, like for Edge, it has a browser reader. Like you can see whenever I select a content. So for example, this content, and I want for it to read for me, you can see here, there's a place where it's written read aloud the selection. So if I click on it, it will read aloud for me. So for these browser elements to work, sometimes we have to guide them for them to be able to understand. Uh, Basically, it's called accessibility for consideration of people maybe with some disability. So we can use Alt, which improves the accessibility, and it also, like I said about SEO, the search engine optimization, sometimes as we are beginning, as I was explaining you about that, it uses these attributes and it helps to rank your pages faster or on the top on YouTube. So for example, if we say Alt, yes, I'm being called a minute. Okay, Alt, and then we comment on it. So this will just tell the browser that what is supposed to be here. So this file that is supposed to be here, maybe we say it's a sample image or the logo for it, so that the browser, when the browser reaches here, it will know whatever this is. So for example, logo for it. So if sometimes, let me show you an example. Do I have an image? Let's create a folder. Then we find that image. Images. Then we create. We find a photo for it. The logo for it. Here's the logo. So I'll have to rename it to PNG so that it's visible. .png. PNG. Yeah. So images, that's the name of my folder, and then PNG. Let's see if we go to the browser and load it. Yeah, it's loading, but it's loading very big, like that. So how will I do this example? Let me reload, and then I want to put a wrong. I should just DPG the way I did them before. I see if it will do whatever I want it to do. Yeah, boss, it has done whatever I wanted it to do. So the reason that we put that alt attribute, like we've done here before, and then we've explained that whatever this image is the logo for SIT. Sometimes when this is like right now, I've just renamed the image a bit, but you see it shows an icon for an image showing that there's supposed to be a photo here, and then this photo, whatever this photo is supposed to be, is the logo for SIT. So the browser is able, or those immersive reader or those options for accessibility are able to recognize that there's supposed to be an image here, and whatever this image is the logo for SIT. I hope there we are clear. And like I said, there are element specific attributes. So for example, for this IMG for images, like the way the anchor element had href, target, and title as the element specific attributes. For IMG for images, it has also three of them that are specific only to attributes. So the first one is this one, source. This is for those specific image location. Actually, it's just supposed to show the location of the image. We have the alternative text or alt. This is for accessibility and SEO, as I've just explained and shown it to you. The other attribute that's specific to this one is the width and height. So for example, we can say that the width of this image is 200, the height is 150, and it will resize this image for us the way we want it to be. So that is another uh, element specific anchor, element specific attribute that applies for this IMG. So for instance, if we type width here, and then we say that the width is 300 is big, let's just say 100. And then we say height, we say height is maybe 50 because we don't want it to be that big. So when we come back, oh, it was a PNG, so let me switch this to PNG. Let me switch this to PNG. And then let's refresh our page. So this you see, I've extended the width and minimized the height. So for example, let's say the width is, let's take it down to 50. 50 is more, let's just go 100. And then the height, we make it equivalent so that this image, we assume it's a square. And we say the width is 100 and the height is also 100. Now you can see at least there's some symmetry in our image. So, like I've said, there are general attributes that can be used, and there are element-specific attributes that can be used. Another thing that was covered was about lists, and it's important to also remember that because we're going to have something small that is going to have a list, to do a lot of lists. And as Benjamin was able to say, we have two types of lists. We have ordered and unordered lists. So lists, with the list, you encounter lists everywhere. So you need to understand how to work with lists. And there are two ways that you can use lists for whatever you are working on with HTML. So if you have a list of items where the order of the list doesn't happen. So for example, if you are following a recipe or if you are cooking, there's an order to that. Like I'm supposed to maybe cut whatever I'm supposed to cut, put oil, then put whatever I've cut into the pan, not start by putting whatever I've put into the putting oil, then putting the fan and something like that. Like there's an order. I hope you get whatever I'm trying to explain. So there are lists that have order, like you have to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. For example, if it's a procedure or something that you're doing, it has to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. But some other things, maybe a shopping list. If I go to the supermarket, I'm going to take a bottle of water. I'm going to take X. I'm going to take Y, Z. It doesn't have to be in any order, but as long as I get everything on the list. So whenever you have things that don't follow an order, you use what is called an ordered list. So like I've been told before, these ones you use the UL, the tag called UL, which stands for unordered list. So you just the UL and then the closing tag like that UL. And then the funny thing with lists is once you differentiate between if it's ordered or an ordered list, then you have to use the list tag then so that you can write out your list. So the list tag is now LI. Is the list tag. So after you put whether the above one, whether it's unordered or ordered, now you have to put the list tag. So you can say item 1, and then you say maybe up to item 3. Maybe up to item 3, item 2, item 3. So this is how we put the list in an ordered list, and it usually appears with a bullet point like that, like this, to show that this is a point or this is an ordered, this is a list. So it appears with bullet points as compared to what an ordered list is. So in ordered lists, if you want to create a list of items where the order is important, like this person needs to follow the order, or like it's a step-by-step instruction. You're telling someone, when you go to my house, when you open the door first. Once you open the door, on the right is where you find XYZ. Once you do that on the right, and so forth and so forth. So they need to follow the step-by-step instructions so you can use an ordered list. So this one you use the OL elements, the tags for OL instead of the ones for UL. So for example, just use the same list, but we change from UL to OL. OL for ordered list. So this one will now have your list in number form, like number 1 do this, number 2 do that, like that. So you can see now it's the same list, but now you see it goes in number form, like this is the first step, the second step, and then the third step. That is ordered list. So you need to also be very familiar with that. You're going to be using that a lot. So it's very important to be aware of that ordered lists and unordered lists. We are also now going to see about forms. It is important to understand about forms, especially when working with HTML. You will come across these forms a lot, so it is important to understand about them before we move on to CSS. I'll also show another reference that we are going to be using a lot, and it will be important for us to understand that. Before then, is there any question? So that it's not that I'm talking to myself alone, that we are all on the same page. Are we all on the same page? Yes, I've seen Tifa said yes, we are on the same page. Yes, also Lewis has said we are all on the same page. Okay, good. Another thing I wanted to mention on is tables. Okay, so tables, sometimes you want to, this is part of, now that this is some part of the advanced HTML, you want to display some data. and the way to display this data is in table form. And yes, they are less commonly used compared to other things, but it is important to know how to work with them because you're going to be interacting with them a lot. So for tables, okay. So for table, there are three different types of tags or elements that we're going to be using. We're going to be using them to be able to put them in rows, columns, or something that of such when working with the tables. So what we'll be working on first is the element table. So when you type table, you see it auto completes because that is the first thing that we are going to be working on. The second thing that I want to introduce to us is go to elements, letter T. Here it is. So we have TH and TH, TR, and TD. So we have TD, TH, and TR. And it is important to know these three things when working with the table. So the TD stands for table data. So it's a cell element, table data. So you use TD when for table data. You can read more on it. We have TH for table header element. So it's the table header element. And then we have TR for table row. So we have the header, the rows, and also we have the data cell elements that we're going to be using when working with tables. So when working with tables, you use the first elements, the table, then you can say tr, okay, tr for the rows, okay, tr for the rows, and then you can say th. You can say th to put in the header for your cell. We can say first header, and then we repeat the same. We say second header, maybe something like that. Mhm. Second header, second header. Okay, something like that. And we can also use the rows again here. We say tr, and then we use the td now for the table data cell. We say this is data cell, and then we replicate, and we say this is also a data cell. This is also a data cell. Yeah, something like that. This is a data cell. This is a data cell. And when we go to our browser, this is how it's going to be appearing. It's going to maybe to need some CSS for it to draw the lines that we need for it to draw, for them to be visible. But you can see it has made it in the form of a table because the idea that I was going for was the idea that I was going for was the table that is usually the idea that I was going for is the table that is usually something similar to like this. Maybe you are drawing a table like this. So this is how you want your table to be. So if this is how you want your table to be, so like that is how we have tried to arrange our table, where we have our first header which goes to this space. Our second header goes to this space. Our third, the data cell here and the other data cell there. So that is how we are able to work with tables with HTML. Also, we mentioned about Emmet abbreviation. This is also something that is key for us to know, because we're going to be working with these Emmet abbreviations a lot. So these Emmets are, they come with, it's a plugin inbuilt, it's inbuilt in VS Code. This Emmet, as you can see, Emmet, we had said that it gives us the boilerplate when you use the exclamation mark. So this Emmet is a plugin built into VS Code. It helps us to write HTML and CSS efficiently by providing a bunch of shortcuts that you may need now and then. So to write a lot of these, sometimes you don't want to repeat yourself, you don't want to memorize a lot of these things, so you use these Emmet shortcuts. So the first one is the exclamation mark that we use a lot for us to get the boilerplate. So whenever you type the exclamation and then you type enter, it generates for you the boilerplate. And there are many of them. You over time you'll come to work out with them. Like for now, you see with the tags. So for instance, let me show you another one. So here, I have maybe I have the H1. Okay, then I just write a random thing there, and I want to change this maybe to a H2 by use of these Emmet abbreviations. You see, when I clear out this first, it was like this H1. So by use of this Emmet plugin, when I clear this one from here on the opening tag, it also does the same for the closing tag. Observe, when I clear it on the opening tag, it also does the same for the closing tag. So that's how it removes the tag. You can be able to wrap your whatever you're working on and so forth and so forth. So you can play with it, find out some of the features of this Emmet abbreviation. For instance, if I put a full stop and I click on enter, it gives me a div class. So you see, like there are many shortcuts that work with this Emmet abbreviation that will be important for you to familiarize yourself with. You'll discover them as you continue. Now let's go to the basics of working with a form in HTML. When you go to most web pages, let's see whatever I want us to see. Let's say I want something that has a form, so that we can experiment with whatever I'm trying to say. I don't know about it. Let's see if new customer has a form. So forms are a critical part of whatever you will be creating, whatever site you will be creating. The most critical part of that site will be form. That is the way that will what will be linking the users to whatever is in your backend to be able to process the data that they are providing in your form. I don't see a form here. Let me find a page that has a form. Any page that you know that has a form that we can use as an example. Which page? Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, let's use this one. Yeah, let's go to contact us, customer service. Let's see something like this. If it has a form so that we can use it as an example. This is unable to process a request at this time. If you know a page that has a form that we can use as an example that is faster, I can't remember any from the top of my head. Let's use this one for contact us as Microsoft support. Let's get this one.
I think
Yeah,
Gmail.
I said. I haven't had. Mhm. If I don't get an example, oh, I know what I'll use. Mm, mm. This is what I'll use instead of, because time is also moving. Let's wait for it to run the local server. In case there's any question before we dive into forms, it has run the server. It has to go to the contacts page. It's just an example of a form that we can use.
Bobby, can you hear me?
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. There's no problem. It will be loading. Okay. Okay. Thank you. It will be loading as we continue. Let me just give some basic explanation of what I'm trying to explain about forms. So these forms you'll have to work with forms whenever you are creating different sites or whatever you'll be working on. So you need to understand what these forms are, the proper inputs that you need to put there, just a basic idea of how to be able to style these forms, because you'll be working with them a lot. So it's essential for you to understand them. So for instance, in this page, if we go to our contact us page, you can see we have something similar to this, whereby we put our name, we put our email and whatever message we want, and then we send. So this form, it's the gateway to our backend. So when the user puts in their name, their email, this data that they're providing on this form, we can be able to do stuff with it. We can be able to receive their messages. We can be able to collect even different types of data. So we need to understand the proper types of inputs when working with forms for each possible data item that we can think of. For example, if it's on an e-commerce platform, you will need the billing information, the CVA, whatever code for credit cards, the CVS code, the expiry date for the credit card or the debit card. You'll need the name of the person who owns the debit card, the amount of money. Like, you need to think of all those, the address for the shipping address and so forth. So you need to know the proper types of inputs for each possible data item, since there are many ways that you can collect pieces of data. So it's able for you to understand that. And one of the things that we'll be using is what we call the form element. Let's open up our whatever you are working with. So we go to our index.html file. Now we are going to be using our form element, which is a container element. It's just like the div elements. You're going to see that shortly. So it's just like the div elements. So the form elements we'll be using will be wrapping up all it will be wrapping up all the essential things that we want, all the inputs of a user and how they will be interacting with that form. So we are going to create an example form, and like I said, there are general attributes and there are element specific attributes. So for instance, in forms, there are, I think it's two essential attributes that we're going to be working with. The first is called action. So what this attribute will be doing is it will be taking us to the URL value that tells the form where it should send the data to. So it will be telling the form where it should be sending the data to. So we have the form element. So when you type form like that, just it gives you this form element. And when we said the attributes go into the opening tag. So on this opening tag, if we now we have like the first one, action. You just type action and click enter, it gives you the quotation mark automatically because it knows what this does. So here maybe you can put the URL or the path that we want the form to send the data to. So for example, you can tell it to send our data to test.com path, something like that. So it whatever data will be input on our form, it will send to this URL. That is where the data will be sent to be processed. We will go, as we continue, we'll look much more into detail about how that is done. That is what we're going to be using this action attribute. The second attribute that we're going to be working with in terms of forms is what we call method. We call it the method attribute. So this tells the browser, which this is a bit much more detailed. It tells the browser which HTTP request method to follow. So as we continue, we are going to learn about HTTP requests. There are different types, and whatever you expect to get back in return, we're going to be able to see them as we continue. It's a bit much more advanced than where we are, but I'll just show you an example so that we continue. We usually have get, which is used to retrieve data, post for submitting data. We have delete, that is used to delete data. We have the put to update. So the most common ones are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The other ones are there, but they're not as common ones. So you can research more on the HTTP request methods. But the most common ones when we're submitting a form that you'll be working with will be get and post. But these 5 up to the delete, the get, post, put, delete, and sometimes patch. Yeah, get, post, put, delete, and patch. These are some of the common HTTP request methods. We'll dive much more deeper when we reach to that. So this method attribute is the second attribute when working with forms. It tells the browser which HTTP request method it should use to submit the form. So it can use the get, as we've seen what the get does. The get retrieves data. It can be used to retrieve data, or we can use the post to submit new data. For example, if you're inputting your name, your email, we'll use the post because that is new data. So that is what we are going to be using here for the method attribute. So we just go to the end of this quotation mark, and then we are going to input method. And then when you click on enter, it just gives you the quotation mark. So here you can put post. You can put it in caps or small. It usually works. Or you can put it as get. So you're the one to decide whatever kind of data you want. As I've said, the ones that you find most useful when working with forms are get and post. So we use get when we want to get data, retrieve data. And so that's why we use get. And we, for example, if you want to get data from the server, for example, when you search something on Google, it uses a get request so that it gets the search results. We're going to do an example. Google.com. Okay, so here, if I search something, so if I search maybe, what can I search? Maybe let's say you said something like that. If I search for that, Google uses the get, that get request to go through its servers and find for me information that I have, the information that I have requested to give me back the result. And when you want to change something in the server, we are going to be using a post. We're going to be using a post to make changes. So for example, when a user creates a new account, you see that's a change that is going to the server. You're going to use a post request. That is when you want to change something on the server. If you're making a payment on a website, you'll use a post request mostly. So that is the attributes that work with forms. There are other things like form controls. So if you want your form to start collecting user data, we need to use something called form control elements. So these are what we're going to be looking at shortly. The form control elements. So these are the elements that the user interacts with on the form. They can be text boxes, drop-down menus, buttons, check boxes, and many more that we're going to be exploring. So for example, up to here so far, let's say we want to use a post method. And now we want to be able to have an input type of element. So the input element, this is the most versatile one that we're going to be using. Of all the form control elements, this is the one that we're going to be using a lot. It has several attributes, but the most common one that we work with on this one is what we call a type attribute. So this type attribute will be telling the browser the type of data that it should be required to be put in this element. So for example, let me show you. We say input for this element input, then we close tag. It's also a void element in its own. So in the first tag, we put our attribute. So the attribute that you're going to be using here is called type. And then when you click enter, so you can maybe, let's say, text. So we want this data to be accepting text. So if you want this data to only accept text, use small letters. So if you want it to accept text, so when we go to this data, it will only be accepting text. It won't be accepting these other things. It will only be accepting text. Yeah, so it has given us this box. So for this one, it will be accepting only text. So if you want to collect maybe first name, last name, you can be using that one, the type, to be collecting text. So for example, let us go on first, then we'll get back to that. So we also have another one called labels. So it's an input on its own that is sometimes when the user doesn't know what kind of data they want or they're supposed to provide. So instead of to use the input, we can use the labels to inform the user what type of data that we want them to input there. So for example, we say we want them to input, let's use that label element, label. We want for them to input their first name, and we also want them to input, we just want them to input their first name. So we go to the opening tag. We say it's label 4, and then you click enter, it gives you that. So we say it's a label for the first name. This you'll get them if you work with HTML more, you will get this advanced concept, first name. So you want them to input their first name here. And then now we go back to whatever we were doing, the input type. So we go to input, then type, and then we say it's text, like we had said before, it's text. And then now we give it an ID. So we say its ID, it's first name. Yeah, we say it's the first name, and then we close this. It says the first name. So when we go to this is how it will appear. So this form, we have given it a label. So this form will only be accepting the first name. And the fact that it's like this, it means it will be accepting texts. So here is where we're expecting to have our first name. The other attributes that are there when working with forms, we have the four attributes, we have placeholders and so forth. So let's also use a placeholder so that we see. So for example, here, just here too on our input type, we add this other element called placeholder. Then I can put a placeholder name there that when the user goes to that page, they'll know that they usually will see it written as John Doe, like that, John Doe, Doe with an E, John Doe. Usually that is what is commonly used, so that when you go to a page, it's supposed to be with an E like that. You'll see whatever you're supposed to input a name, they'll give you something like that. This is a placeholder, true that this is where you input your name. So when you're experimenting with it, maybe you can put your name if you want. You can say like that, so that the user will know. So you can say your name like that. So when each person is typing their name, they have a reference of how they're supposed to do it. So it's just going to show how the text will be inputted in whatever format that it's supposed to be input in, and so forth and so forth and so forth. So this is just the basics of working with forms. As we proceed, we shall see more on them. Let's try something else. For instance, let's make a much more detailed form for us to be able to get a better understanding. So far, I think you have the basics like this. So maybe I can just repeat this part so that we just see how it looks. I just said this will be now the last name. So anyway, this first here, we just put last. This one we also put last name, and then here the same last name. Then instead of John Doe, we just have John, and then instead of John Doe, we have Doe here. So if we go to it, this is how it will appear. It's just that I have zoomed it, so this is how it will appear. And if you want this to maybe come below the first name, you can use some of whatever you had learned before. For example, here you can use the break like that, and it will follow just down here the way you want it. So you can play around with it and share some resources that you can use to play around with HTML and see if you are able to do some of these things. There's also something called form validations and so forth. We're going to see that as we continue. What else guys, was I supposed to cover tonight? Okay, I've remembered. I wanted us to, now that we have some basic core concepts about this HTML, we do maybe something simple, and then we can proceed from there. We do something simple as a group and maybe as individuals, so that we see that we are on the same page. So I can maybe give up a challenge so that we can practice this knowledge, because with whatever we are learning, it's practice over time. We get to have all these things, or some of them, not all of them. It's impossible to have all of them at your fingertips. That's why we have references. Like I've said, we have MDN docs. So whenever you search MDN docs, you can use it as a reference to help you remember or understand whatever maybe you had not gotten well. You can also use devdocs.io, as I had said, devdocs.io as your reference materials. Another one that is common is called W3 Schools. W3 Schools. You can also use it as a reference material, especially for HTML. And even if you don't have a laptop, it comes with some windows so you can practice in. So for example, let's say we are learning HTML, it gives us a window where we can, it's like an online IDE, so we can practice whatever we are learning. And it has a lot of whatever we are learning, the elements, the attributes, it has all of them, so you can experiment with also that one. Another one, I'll share some others on the WhatsApp group as we continue. So these are some of the resources that you can use in case you feel left behind or such and such. Okay, so for whatever I want us to do as a practice, for the first one, let's put it simple. I want us to do maybe recipes because this has it will just entail using the basic elements, the paragraph, the lists, and so forth. So we can do a page for recipes. So you'll just create a GitHub repo. You will call it. Let me put the instructions. Create GitHub repo. Call it sit. Sit. Just you can use it as one words, or you can put a dash or an underscore, whichever you find comfortable for you. You create a repository called set recipes. Of course, you clone it to your local machine. After that, you can open it, cd to it, then open VS Code on it, and then you can create a HTML file called index.html. So this is after you cd to it and then open VS Code. You can I'll share the instructions. You can create a file called index.html. A file called index.html, and then you create maybe your favorite recipe or something like that. Your favorite recipe, then you create the recipe for your favorite meal or something like that. Your favorite meal. Yeah, the recipe for your favorite meal. Yeah, something just simple like that. That will at least help you practice whatever you have learned so far. Let me show you how you can make it look like. So all recipes. You can visit this website called All Recipes. It usually has a lot of recipes, but that is not the essence of visiting there. Just take an example for one. Let's say you want to do this Alfredo sauce. So this is how you can add images, whatever you have learned so far, practice. So this will be the title. We say my recipe is called whatever this is called. A brief description using a paragraph. You can maybe add an image, how long it will take, how to make it. You see the ingredients, you put them there, how to make them, how to serve them. You just play with it, be creative with it. There is no limitation of how far you can take it. That's just a small task to keep you sharp and to maybe help you practice whatever you have learned. For those something like this, you see, like they give you the ingredients. We have the ingredients, the directions. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this. Just that is enough. Something like this, you can add images if you want, or if you don't. So something like that. I think we've been able to cover most of whatever is essential in terms of HTML. In terms of HTML, I think we've been able to cover most of what is essential that you need. You can visit the reference guests that I've added, and I'll continue adding more as we proceed on, and we'll continue also working with it as we proceed on. Thank you for your time. I'll hand over to yes. Any question? Yes, you can ask.